In some cultures of the past, when a royal son rose to the throne of his father, his brothers would be killed off so as to secure that throne for that son. Far less often in ancient times do we have situations where the love and devotion that one brother has for another is attested to. We have such an account with regard to Philadelphia. Philadelphia means brotherly love, and it was established by one brother, the second BC Pergamum king Attalus II, to honor his brother Eumenes II. Philadelphia was most likely the smallest and feeblest city of all the cities mentioned in the Revelation, but its church may very well have been the greatest and strongest church of them all. Certainly, along with the church of Smyrna, it was the most highly honored in its letter. It seems that the church in Philadelphia also survived the longest, not giving in to the invading Turks until a Christian Byzantine army was hired by the Turks in order to bolster that army and to defeat Philadelphia. Nevertheless, to this day, believe it or not, Philadelphia remains a titular see of the Roman Catholic Church, or essentially a dead see of the Roman Catholic Church, although it's very unlikely that that church has even one member still there in the city, which today is called Alashehir. In AD 17, a terrible earthquake struck this region. I mentioned it in the previous session. 4 of these 7 cities were completely destroyed: Sardis, Thyatira, Pergamum, and Philadelphia. Apparently, Philadelphia was so thoroughly destroyed and suffered so many aftershocks that its inhabitants lived outside the city in makeshift villages, not only for years, but for decades thereafter. Apparently, there were also subsequent earthquakes which caused them to stay out of the city. The instability and anxiety that persisted in their minds and hearts added to the backdrop of this letter, which promises supreme stability and even a new heavenly city. Virtually all of the ruins of Philadelphia lie beneath the city of Alashehir, except for the ruins of this Byzantine church, which was dedicated to St. John. And there are other archaeological fragments in that small archaeological park in the city upon which this basilica stands. And also there's just the shape of a theater up on the Acropolis, but even the Acropolis has not been at all excavated. So not much to see nowadays in Philadelphia. Let us read together Revelation chapter 3, verses 7 through 13. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia, write, "These are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come upon the whole world to test those who live on the earth. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. Him who overcomes, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will he leave it. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Here in the window illustrating the letter to the church in Philadelphia, you have the key of David. You also have a lamp with a very large frame representing much vitality in the church in Philadelphia. And you also have a pillar in the temple of my God, written about in this passage, with a nice Ionic capital, which I guess we could say is the artist's touch. The description of Christ holding the key of David is an allusion to Isaiah 22, particularly verses 20 through 22, where a servant of God named Eliakim is described as the chief steward or the major domo of Jerusalem. And here in verse 7, Christ is essentially identified as the holy and true major domo of God's kingdom. Now, the door that Christ opens, no one can shut. Exactly what does this door refer to? This is not altogether clear. Some scholars argue that this must be the door of missionary opportunity, since Philadelphia was located on the edge of Phrygia and to regions beyond, regions hardly penetrated at all with the gospel. Certainly all 7 churches in the Revelation had opportunities for mission activities right within their respective cities. But it seems that Philadelphia was particularly well located with regard to these regions beyond for missionary activity. However, as good as that interpretation may sound, it doesn't seem to be the best explanation. Most likely, in light of the context here, the open door refers to entrance into God's kingdom, which was just mentioned in the previous verse, and is also mentioned later on in this passage, symbolized as the new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. It's quite clear from verse 9 that the Christians in Philadelphia had essentially been excommunicated from the local Jewish synagogue. This sort of thing happened as the Jews and the Christians in cities such as this grew further apart. And this would have been devastating for the Jewish Christians in the churches because the local synagogue was far more than just a place of worship. It was a community center, a place of relational connections, a place of communal meals, and it was a place of judicial proceedings and so much more. To have been cut off from the local synagogue would have been socially crippling. And it was no wonder that the church in general is identified as having had little strength. However, the tables will be turned, says the major domo, who loves his own. In verse 10, the wording of the Greek can mean keep you from undergoing or keep you through the hour of trial that is coming upon the whole world. Now that difference may not seem like a big deal to you, but it's a very big deal to some Christians who use this verse to support the doctrine of the rapture. I certainly don't have the final word for you on which interpretation is correct, but I myself lean toward the interpretation of keep you through the hour of trial. The hour of trial being periods of trial and tribulation that Christians have undergone throughout history. And the church in Philadelphia, no doubt also connected their hour or hours of trial to the earthquakes that they had experienced and would continue to experience. So natural disasters as well. In verse 11, the symbolic reference to the crown is again the Stephanos, which we came across in the letter to Smyrna. In case you haven't noticed, this letter to the church in Philadelphia and the letter to the church in Smyrna were very similar, both lavish with commendations and no criticisms to speak of. Imagine those who had suffered repeatedly from earthquakes and aftershocks and fleeing the city due to the danger of falling blocks and rocks. Imagine the messenger reading to them what we find in verse 12. Him who overcomes, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will he leave it. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God, and I will also write on him my new name. That new name there, alluding to, we think, the new name, New Tiberius, that Philadelphia took on for a time after Emperor Tiberius helped them recover from that horrific earthquake by giving them money to rebuild. Well, despite their little strength and the difficulties that they faced, the church in Philadelphia thrived for years, decades, centuries to come. I find it telling and very touching that when the well-known Bishop Polycarp of Smyrna was burned at the stake, 11 other martyrs met their fate with him. And all 11 of those Christians were from the city of Philadelphia. We don't even know their names, but we know that they were faithful until the end. And thus they will become like pillars in the temple of our God. May we, in the living of our lives, reflect their faithfulness. And may our faithfulness foreshadow our reward. Amen.